Welcome to the Be the Sun, Not the Salt podcast. Today's guest is Laura Morton. Now, I met Laura while she was
Mhm.
finishing up a
Right.
documentary called Anxious Nation, which we'll get into. And it turns out that Laura Morton is a prolific author. She has written over 22 New York Times best-selling books. And she'll tell you more about the lessons that she's learned from that. But she is a remarkable person, a breast cancer survivor, a single parent, a beautiful young woman, and a dear friend. Con, you want to add anything?
Well, I think this mental health advocacy that she's taking on is so important and something that any of our listeners, whether you're somebody who's going through it yourself, your family, there's going to be nuggets in here around Anxious Nation and not just the movie itself, but the tools and resources that are available for people. But I think I also loved just she's a prolific author, but she's a storyteller because her when she's an author, she's writing other people's stories. So I think we learned a little bit about that and what she got out of that. And then I would say, I think the conversation just went into friendship and the importance of friendship and surrounding yourself with people that are uplifting. It was a dynamic conversation that went all over the map and has something for everybody. So it was a fun one.
Some of the other stuff that I really enjoyed, besides just harnessing anxious energy for
Mhm.
good, which is the real message of the documentary film, the lessons that she learned from writing those 22 bestsellers, there's a lot of wisdom there. She talks about the four addictions, which we won't
Yeah, you got to
tell
listen.
people what they are. But after you listen to them, you'll go, oh, yeah, that's helpful. And her story about her breast cancer journey and how we need to surround ourselves with uplifters.
And we also learned how she likes her martinis.
What else did you find memorable, juicy, good?
For me, I think everyone I know is dealing with anxiety in one way, shape, or form, whether it's themselves, their family, somebody they know, or just trying to understand why. Why is anxiety so prolific now? And I think there's so many nuggets, not just in the documentary, but just within our podcast to be able to listen to what she's learned on her journey. It's almost like a fast track. You can learn a lot just from listening and going to some of the resources that she recommends.
And I love that too, Con. I also found myself being reminded to do the how are you doing to someone about themselves or their loved one and wait for the answer
Mhm.
and ask another question to make sure that we reach out to our loved ones who might be going through something difficult.
Well, and I think we talked about just the basics. So we know when people are going through something, but also just checking in on everybody. And you and I try and remind each other to do that a lot. And we talked to Will Guidera. So do you text somebody? Do you call them? And he had that helpful hint about voice texting, which I loved, and I got some great feedback when I used it as well.
Sure.
So yeah, I think it's again, the podcast is supposed to bring gentle reminders to all of us, including us. And that was something that I took away as well.
One thing that I have noticed because I've started doing this is when I ask somebody, how's your son? How's your daughter? And I listen for the answer and I ask a
Mhm.
couple of more questions because I'm concerned.
Mhm.
People really appreciate that. Well,
Right.
obviously, because I actually care. But it's the reminder to me that it's as simple as how is she doing
Yep.
um,
I
that we
agree.
could do more of.
All of
Me
us
too.
can.
So without further ado, let's have a listen and let our audience get some of the nuggets of wisdom from the prolific, the infatigable, un, unable to be fatigued,
Health
infatigable,
awareness,
indefeatable. I
health
can't
health
say it.
mental health
Laura
awareness,
Morton.
author, and all around amazing human being, Laura Morton.
All right. So, Laura, first of all, thank you for doing this, agreeing to do this, but also all that you have done, do, and will do in terms of your life. Connie and I have been talking about this for a while. And then, of course, as we get closer to the podcast, to distill your stories and lessons so that we can help a ton of people who are listening to this. The whole Anxious Nation life that you have led and are still leading, your incredible journey of interviewing and writing 20 bestsellers with these amazing human beings and the light and the lessons that you have learned from your relationship with their lives. And then your life journey of your decision to single parent, your journey through infertility, and your journey through breast cancer. Now, each of those, they're all huge. And I just can't wait to hear your distillations of them. And so you can take us wherever you want to go, but I'm going to stop talking because
That
Connie.
was not a good welcome. It was more like an outline. So because I said this could be 3 separate podcasts. Laura the warrior, Laura the master storyteller, Laura the mental health advocate. So no, I think that was more just to give you an overview versus the welcome we want to give you for the podcast.
Okay, so now let me welcome you.
Laura, let's talk about me more.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's always the fun part.
You are the star of this show, and we welcome you with open arms and an open heart for all that you've done and all that you do and all you keep doing. So thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Harry. That's very kind of you. Connie, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So my first question is, in any of those categories of, let's just talk about Anxious Nation first, because that's where I met you. The first question is, what do you want people to know that they don't know about anxiety specifically and mental illness for young people more generally? So that's my first question.
So I could probably talk for the hour on all this.
No.
But before I get started, Harry, I want to acknowledge that your participation in this film and your support of this film has been extraordinary. And I could not have finished the film if you didn't step up the way that you did. And you continue to step up so that everybody has an opportunity to watch Anxious Nation. From my heart to yours, I'm deeply grateful. Thank you.
Receive.
Yeah, thank you. I feel so lucky that you have come into my purview and that you are in my world. And I never anticipated or expected that I would gain such a beautiful friendship out of all of this. But let me answer the question in terms of why I made Anxious Nation. And it started in 2018. And I thought that I was failing miserably as a parent. My daughter was 7 or 8 years old, and I didn't really know what was happening. But I thought what was happening was only happening in our house, because in 2018, we weren't talking about anxiety the way that we talk about it today. There was still so much stigma, but I was curious to know if anybody else was experiencing this with their kids. So as one does, I put a simple 1-line post on Facebook, kids and anxiety, who's dealing with it? And I was stunned and blown away by the responses. So for me, there was a relief in knowing that it wasn't just me being a horrible mom, and it wasn't just happening in our home. And it took 7 years for somebody to finally give me a diagnosis that my daughter had anxiety. Most of the doctors I took her to just were considering below the neck. It was something physical. There had to be something physical. It wasn't emotional, because 6, 7, 8-year-olds aren't prone to anxiety when in fact they are. So for me, as a storyteller by trade, and as somebody who always wants to put something good into the world, I wanted to look at anxiety from a really diverse point of view. The first question I was really asking was, are we more anxious, or are we just more aware of it? In 2024, I think everybody can agree without a doubt, we are absolutely more anxious, and for lots of reasons. The second question that I was really intrigued to answer is why? What's the cause of this? Why were my parents and my grandparents less anxious than I am or my daughter is? And the third thing, which is really the biggest reason I did it, is what can we do about it? It was really important to me to let families know that they're not alone, and feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
But not just seen and heard. I wanted to give them takeaways, and I didn't want everything tied up in a nice, neat bow, because at the end of the day, and I know you know this, you can't cure anxiety. You can learn to manage it, but we're wired to be anxious in the right circumstances. And so losing that would be a detriment in many areas of your life. So what we hope people can take away from watching the film is that they can recognize those feelings, understand what to do with them, harness them and use them for good.
What do you think that first step is? So, a parent listening to this podcast, you had quite the journey to get to where you got to with helping your daughter. What's the first thing people should do? What do they recognize? What do they need to grapple with to start that journey themselves?
100%. I'm not saying this because I'm promoting the film. Watch Anxious Nation. Watch Anxious Nation with your family. And if you don't know whether or not your kids, if it might be too triggering for your kids, watch it with your partner, your husband, your wife, whoever, by yourself,
Mhm,
because it will open your eyes in so many ways. But as I said earlier, it will give you a common language. And I think when we talk about mental health, I think it's such an
mhm,
unfair description of what we're talking about. And I think it means something different to everyone, right? You
mhm,
mental health could be schizophrenia, mental health could
mhm.
be bipolar, mental health could be I'm
Yeah,
having a really rough week, I'm going to the spa, I need
right.
a mental health day.
It's a big range,
It's a
right?
huge range. And so I think that we have to have a common language to be able to talk about what this is and what this isn't. I think one of the reasons we are such an anxious nation today and why we see so much anxiety in our youth is because you have a generation of anxious parents who never dealt with their own anxiety. So, in an effort not to have their kids feel the way that they do, they protect them. It comes from a totally loving, totally incredibly empathetic place, but in the process, they're stripping away kids' ability to maneuver through difficult times. They're taking away resilience. And I think it's really important that we allow our kids to go through these experiences, but we have to give them the tools to be able to manage it. So, systemically, the family needs the same tools. So, to your question, Connie, I think families have to work on this together. And the first step is to be able to talk about it within your family and talk about it with no judgment, no shame, no stigma, to talk about it as if you wanted your child to learn the piano. This is what we have to do if you want to learn the piano.
Mhm, yeah,
And some kids are going to be more natural at playing the piano, and some kids are
mhm,
not. So I think that there's a really solid first step. Recognize what you're dealing with because so many parents think their kids are being manipulative or they think that what they're feeling isn't real. And my biggest takeaway in making this film was acknowledging that what my daughter is feeling when she's in an anxious state is genuine. It's how she feels. And putting
mhm,
my own feeling on it is processing through my adult eyes, and it's not fair to her. So, acknowledge
mhm.
what she's feeling is real has been a game changer for us as mother and daughter.
So I love game changer insights. I want to live my life eyes peeled for game changer understandings, insights, just what you said.
Mm,
Dr. Phil gave you and the film that credit in your interview with
mhm,
him. Somewhere we'll figure out how to post it or link it, but it's a beautiful articulation of him saying to you what you just said, which is you met the kids where they are, which to your point is so what you're experiencing is real, huh? And your beautiful examples of all those kids, including your daughter Sevi, is such a great game changer. Isn't
mhm.
that lovely that we can all take away? Go watch the film, but you can take away right now. Meet your kid where they are, where your kid
Right.
is, right? Where
It's
Mhm.
very hard for parents.
it's
It's
Yes.
very hard because they're busy, right? And they're
Mhm,
stressed. And the Surgeon General just released a warning. Last year was our kids are in crisis. This year it's the parents are in crisis. Duh.
mhm, mhm. Our
Let's
kids are in crisis, so
right.
yeah.
The world is a wonky place right now. The world has always been a wonky place. So I don't blame you
Mhm,
for that. And I also very clearly want to state I also do not blame screen time, phones, and social media as being the reason. I think it is a reason. I think it is a contributor. I think there's great correlation. But I think if you stripped all of that away, I think you'd still have a generation of anxious parents raising kids in such a way. and dealing with things that none of us have dealt with in our lifetime. Once in a lifetime, every 100-year pandemic, start there. Okay. School absenteeism is an all-time high, but so is work. So people are not going to the office. And that none of this has anything to do with social media, our phones, our screen time. I don't think that's really the problem. I think it is a piece of the equation, but I really think that we have to acknowledge that there are so many things, school pressure, school shootings. When we moved to California in 2019, and I said to my daughter, your school, you could see the ocean from every building, and you get to eat lunch outside, and it's so wonderful, and you're gonna make so many friends, and you could go to the beach. And my daughter, going into 6th grade, said, "But what's the security like?"
Yes.
This is what the kids worry about, okay?
Mhm.
Add on to that, that my daughter, and I'll share something with you exclusively, I've not shared this with any other interview, but I think it's fair that we talk about it. Add to that, that the opening of the film is my daughter's bat mitzvah.
That's right.
So after October 7th last year, there was a anti-Semitic event in my daughter's school,
Mhm.
and I was in New York. I was across the country, and I got a phone call
Mhm.
from my daughter, and I also got
Right.
immediately the message that came from the school. And it took my daughter about a week to tell me how she felt about all of this, but she asked me to take the bat mitzvah out of the film,
Mm.
and because she felt that it put a target on her back. And so these are things that our kids are dealing with that I think make up much more. There's environmental, right? Starts at home. No question, it starts at home. There's circumstantial. So if somebody goes through a traumatic experience, they're whatever that is, they could have been involved in a school shooting. And then you have situational. And the
Yes.
kids today, they don't connect. They've lost that connection. My daughter doesn't go to parties. She might go to a football game, but not so into it. Friends don't get together and go out to dinner. Like, it's a whole different way than I grew up. And I'm
Mhm.
constantly saying, "What? There has to be a party. It's Friday night. Why aren't you going?" And she's like, Nobody has them." These kids don't know how to connect.
Mhm.
And Tim Story, who I know you've had on your show, says it so beautifully in our film. He said, "We were never meant to be singular. We were always meant to be plural." And I think it's so important that these kids, they have to understand that community is meaningful.
So you said something, and Tim said it, and I'm going to reiterate what you just said and what Tim said. It takes a village. This whole one of the big
Mhm.
insights is that the village metaphor is really important. It starts with being what you said. We have to recognize, somebody's got to recognize, and then enlist the village helpers and the people in our green room and in our corners to say, who can help us navigate this that I am seeing in front of me with my child? I'm so glad you asked. And the other thing he says, which you do such a marvelous job, obviously over 37 different ways, destigmatize the whole
Mhm.
issue. This is not something to be afraid of or embarrassed about or shamed about. We got to be able to say, I'm having a tough time. I'm so glad you told me that. Let's let anyone
Mhm.
who listens to this watch the film and keep their eyes peeled for who they might look out and say, you know what? I want to ask Laura about how's her daughter doing. I saw her the other day. Why don't you just ask Laura how her daughter is doing?
Mhm.
And
The smallest
the
gesture, right? To
smallest
connect.
gesture.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so let me just ask you, how is Sevy doing?
Oh, thank you for asking. Sebi's having a banner year.
Oh, thank God.
This is the first time Sebi just entered 11th grade, and it is the first time that I've seen her excited about school, excited about the classes she's taking. She's been on time every day so far this year. And
Wow. I've
yeah, I
never
mean,
done that.
it's been a big change in her. Sevi spent the summer making up some work that she needed to do to continue on. And I made the decision that this was going to be Sevi's summer of growth. So I hired a life coach for her and had her work with a life coach and just kept her busy. And I made myself incredibly available to her all summer as well. And I think that made a big difference for us.
Love it.
And so thank you for asking. She's doing well, still very much talking about how she can impact other people's lives, especially kids, that she's so articulate and so
Mm.
well spoken and really from her heart talks about her own struggles with the hope that she could just help one person.
I'm proud of her. You make sure you tell her that I said I'm so thrilled and proud of
Thank
her
you.
for that. We,
Yeah.
we don't do any of this for ourselves. We're doing it so we can help a ton of people. And I hope that Sevi can fulfill that wish and desire because she can.
Thank you, Harry. I
welcome.
will. Yeah.
And
She's been
to
great.
that end, she doesn't need me, but if she ever wants any support in terms of get out there, girl, you can do it. I'm happy to be a completely in the background supporter of hers in the same mission to spread. Maybe somebody can reach out and ask somebody, how you doing? And
Well,
wait for the
that's
answer.
that's what it's all about. Just the simple connection like that. And I think I recently had a birthday,
Happy
and
birthday.
thank you. And I had a dinner in New York. And what was amazing was there were a lot of people in the room that I've seen individually, but there were 5 of us that hadn't been in the same room together for 30 years. And it was magical because what I wanted to do was make a memory for everybody
Mhm.
and create a moment that brought us together. Not one cell phone on the table other than people taking pictures, right? Everybody engaged, human contact, dialogue,
Hmm.
laughter, just that. I think as I'm entering this next decade of my life, I think that was a hell of a way to bring it in,
I love
right?
that.
Yeah.
I love that.
So I did it again in California the week later.
Okay, let me just take that apart, kind of. You're not going.
Yeah.
What did you do? Who did you choose to be there? Let me just take a page from your book on that one. Who'd
You
you
know what?
invite?
It was really interesting because I could have filled the room, but what I really chose were the people who so I chose 2 rooms that could only hold one room could hold 17 people, one could hold 20.
Uh-huh.
And I chose very carefully,
Mhm.
and I chose the people that have had deep meaning in my life. And I didn't know this going in, but I know it coming out that I've actually had deep meaning in their lives.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there was when you're with a group of people and when you're going around a table and 16 people are telling you what you mean to them,
Mhm.
that is a lot coming at you. It took me days to process that because and this is I think appropriate for your heliotropic way of thinking. One, there would have been no occasion to have anybody say that to me other than this moment.
Right. Or your
But the
dad, or
things
your memorial.
that's so by the way, that is exactly what I said in my welcome speech. I said, so often at our age, we're gathering at funerals now, and it's late to say,
Mhm.
this is what you mean to me, right? I said, so let's do it while we're alive and let's create joy and not grief. And it was Sean Rawls who said, it's unusual to be in a room with 17 lifters.
Mhm.
And yeah, but we were certainly in a room with 17 lifters. It was 17 people in a room in New York that all walk through the world wanting to build people up and not tear people down. And there is
Ah.
something so extraordinary about that.
So let us just pause and marinate in that. Boy, I can feel that in that room. I want to recreate that. I'm coming up on my 70th. I was talking to another friend who's celebrating his 70th. He goes, I don't want to have a lot of people tell me, Dick, you're a good guy. Yeah, but listening to you talking about this makes me want to choreograph, curate, make happen that experience, not for my ego, tell me again how great I am, but rather so that all of us could swim in upliftment. This is what it means to be the sun. This is what we're trying to do. And the way you articulate that, Shouldn't we do that some more? Yes.
That is a gift that keeps on giving,
Exactly.
and it really is. And there were people, there were pockets of people there that didn't know anybody walking into the room. But when
Mhm.
they left, it was new friends who feel like old friends.
Mm.
And it was incredible. But I just think that as you go through life is busy for all of us. You
Mhm.
have to make the time, carve out that time, choose wisely. Do not choose the energy vampires. Don't choose somebody to attend your dinner because you think you have to invite them. Somebody asked me as I'm going into this next decade, what is the one lesson? And my answer was, I stopped giving a shit what other people think. Right. So, yeah. And everybody's like, well, how do you do that? Right? Like, how do you do that? And I said, it's not that hard.
So let me
It's
Mhm.
my joy was giving that. Thank you for that. My joy was giving the memory. Let me provide the memory.
So let me ask
My
you a crass and
Yeah.
inappropriate, but that's okay. We'll edit this out too, perhaps. What did you do with the spouses that you didn't really want there?
Surprisingly, not surprisingly, nobody cared.
So you
They
literally invited one half of a couple because you
no, there were some couples there because I'm equally friends with, but we have a mutual friend who I won't mention her name,
Mhm.
but I said, "Do you wanna bring your husband?" And she said, "No." Not only do I not wanna bring him, I think he'd be out of his mind if he came. So,
Good. That's why I'm
yeah,
asking the very practical. I want to do. I'm wanting to do this. I'm going to do this. So I really want to do it. That's all.
do it.
I
Don't
intend
talk
to.
about it. Just
Exactly.
do
Thank
it.
you.
Take action.
Thank you. One of the
Yeah.
things that Anxious Nation did for me. Now I did this before because I was a family therapist and I'm a clinician, so I understand the world that we live in. But what Anxious Nation did for me, seeing the film and talking about it, and the Tim Story articulation of "It Takes a Village," I am way more what's going on with your kid and follow up with 3 or 4 questions because
Yeah.
I want to know. And this is not a new world for me.
Right.
I can help in whatever she, they, he, you are going through. And man, oh man, have I been able to be helpful to people. Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you.
I love that we are doing this, that we did this, that you're doing this. So
Yeah, thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah, we're excited. It's it's always nice to be able to talk about the film,
Mhm.
and this has been a a labor of love for sure. And I think that people have asked me over the years whether or not I'm anxious. And I said, I wasn't until I started making a documentary about anxiety. And and yeah, and then try making a documentary about anxiety in the middle of a pandemic. I don't know that I've ever been more anxious in my
Mm.
life, but because so many people that I love and care for believed in me enough to be able to to support this film, that I will never stop doing what needs to be done to make
Mm.
sure that this film is out there in the world, because I would never want to let anyone down. And when people watch the film, they love it,
Yeah.
and it's helpful, and that's why you do it. Listen, you don't do documentaries to make money. You do documentaries to make a difference, and I think that that is exactly what we're doing.
Love this. So I'm so mindful that we want to get to more stuff. Can we move to some of this other wisdom of yours? And I was saying to Connie earlier, isn't it nice? if we have a map to go, because you don't have to make the mistakes that somebody else made. And you have listened two things. You've listened to so many people and told their stories. I'd love to distill some of the wisdoms, plural, that you personally took from their stories and made your life better.
I have had an extraordinary path with having unprecedented access to some of the greatest business minds in the world, to, I think, some of the most talented people that work in the field of film, television, music. My path on health and wellness has also been pretty extraordinary. And with each one of those projects, so I am well over 60 books. I have stopped counting when my age and the books got to the same age, and that was at 50. I just stopped counting. But of those books, 22 of them have been New York Times bestsellers, and many more have been bestsellers on other lists. So my track record is pretty awesome if for somebody that does this. But what has been more awesome was that I've been able to spend time with people like John Maxwell, with people like Joan Lunden, with people like Justin Bieber and the Jonas Brothers and Melissa Etheridge and Katherine Schwarzenegger and Roker and Deborah Roberts. And the list goes on and on. And the business books, which have been the last 5 or 6 years, I've really focused on business books. And I've worked with Glenn Stearns, Dave Liniger, Bob Parsons, some really extraordinary thought leaders in their own right. And the stories that I get to cherry pick when I work with them are not really the success stories.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great, but it's the stories about failure that really impact me the most. And those stories they guide everything. Like I don't personally have to go through what they went through because
Mm-hmm.
when I write with these people, I write in first person, so I write as them. So in many ways, my brain has been through it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing what I get to take from those experiences. But I love to talk about somebody. John Maxwell had an extraordinary impact on me because we wrote a book together called Intentional Living. And it wasn't until I wrote that book that I got super intentional in the kind of work that I wanted to do. And I came up with 3 boxes that had to be checked for me to say yes. Simple, such an easy way to look at deals. And if it didn't check all of those boxes, then the answer was no. It was really that simple. And writing that book with John was, I think, the catalyst to getting more intentional with the work that I do. The other person who I think of is Tom Ferry. And Tom is a real estate coach. He runs a very large coaching business. When I wrote Tom's book called Life by Design, Tom was doing about $8 million a year. Tom is now doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And I don't want to say it was because of the book, but I'm not going to deny it either. But the way that Tom got me to write his book, and it took a year or so for me to say yes, because I really had no interest in writing a real estate coach's book. Like it just wasn't something that was that interesting to me. But his book is not about real estate. His book was about creating the life you want by design. And the way that he got me to write the book is that we were sitting in a restaurant in New York City, and I had just ordered a very perfectly chilled martini. And just as I had reached to take a sip of it, he goes, "Hey, have I ever told you about the 4 addictions?" And I pulled my hand back. And I said, no, as a matter of fact. And he said, yeah, he goes, I think that there are 4 addictions in life that everybody has one or maybe several of them or even all of them. Every other addiction is an offshoot of those addictions. So what do you think they are? And I looked at him and I'm curious if either one of you, Harry, I think you and I have had this conversation.
I remember having it, but I can't remember the 4 addictions. But I could make them up.
Connie, I think you're
Audio.
Hear me?
Yes. See, beautiful. That's old plug in, turn off, turn on.
Saying I
but
was
we
still
can hear
thinking
you.
about that martini and hadn't really realized what the addictions were going to be.
I'm going to tell you.
Icy
Yeah,
cold. Okay.
Thanks.
but what do you think they might be?
Well, and that's where I was really curious because I've never seen that list. Like, it's not an official list that I've read. I would say fame. What else? So instead of addictions like alcohol, tobacco, I'm going to think it's like fame, something like that. I don't know. Harry, you're probably better at this.
I like fame. I like fame, fortune,
Money, yeah. Success,
dopamine.
whatever those are. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do we got, Laura? How are we doing?
Sex. Yeah, come on. I want to just tell me. What are the
Harry's
four?
is cookies.
Yeah. This isn't.
Sugar, caffeine, alcohol. Go
So yeah, those are it.
Or are they?
No, they're not.
No.
Okay. So I made similar guesses, and those are all offshoots of the four main addictions. He said the four addictions are as follows. 1, the addiction to drama.
Yeah.
2,
Yep.
the addiction to the past.
Mhm.
3, the addiction to the opinions of others. And 4, the addiction to worry. And that blew my mind. That got me to say yes to write this book because I, like you, Connie, I'd never heard anything like that. And I loved it. And when you really break it down and think about it, what you're really thinking about right now is which ones
Mhm.
do I
Mhm.
have? Worry is my biggest one, right? Worry is my biggest one. And therein is that anxiety connection.
Mhm.
I, for a long time, had a lot of dramatic people in my life gone.
Mhm.
I do not live in the past. And I find most successful people that I've worked with absolutely have a hard time talking about how they built their company because they're just forward thinking. And so they don't look backwards, they look forward. And really, that is such a great way to be able to live. But worry is the one for me that, and the opinions of others, by the way,
Mine.
is another one. And that's a hard one to shake
Mhm.
too. Opinions of
I love
and
these.
why
I
do you
hate to
drive,
confess
why
this,
do you
that's
drive
me.
hard and genius? Because when you really think about it, like, why do you wear that watch? Why do you drive that car? Why do you live in that house? And so as people are listening to this, these are the questions that you can marinate on a little bit. And so back to my statement at my birthday,
Mhm.
it's just I just stopped caring what other people think.
Love this.
And
You had
yeah,
3
yeah,
boxes for Life by Design, and
sure.
what are they? When you
So 3 boxes for me to say yes to a project.
Yes.
Life by Design is Tom Ferry's book,
Ah.
which I think you can still get on Amazon. But my boxes are really simple. I have to genuinely like the person.
Mhm.
I have to believe in their message, and it has to put good into the world.
Ooh.
You know, that's kind of what we
Mm.
do. That's kind of our filter for this podcast too. Very similar.
Totally.
We gotta like
That's why you have me on as a guest.
That's correct.
Well, that is
That's
exactly why we
kidding
have
me?
you on.
No, seriously. It is the criteria.
Mhm.
Good and seriously, you gotta like the person. They
On
gotta be
everything. On everything. If you're dating, do I like the person?
Yeah.
What do they stand for? And
and
do they put good in the world?
and then they putting
Right.
good in the world.
Yeah, right?
How about that?
So I think it's a really good barometer, and it has served me really well since I finished writing Intentional Living.
I think that's a
Man.
great takeaway for everybody. I'm
I
still
see,
thinking
this
about these
is
habits
w
too.
what I love about this podcast. I like them all. They're your favorite kids. It's so actionable for me. Everything that we've talked about so far is I can do something with it. It's not just interesting and fascinating and true. I can do stuff with this. I can use the filter. I can be mindful of the 4 addictions. I know when I'm being dramatic. I know when I'm filling myself with thoughts about the future. I know when I'm being, what do they think? What's this? Such a good, useful
It's a great
thing.
conversation starter too.
Oh. By the way,
Yeah.
did you finish that martini?
I did because clearly vodka was
fine.
not the issue.
But it's not olives.
Lucci stuffed olives. Yeah. But and I did write his book. After that, I said to him, Tom, I think I want to write your book. And we went on to write, and it was a New York Times bestseller.
Great. It'll be gobbled up. We're going to gobble it.
In
And
my
we'll see if
cart.
Tom wants to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
Be great.
What I'm sorry, Connie, what?
I said it's going to be in my Amazon cart when we're done.
Oh, yeah. It's a listen, this guy has manifested. The business that he now runs is so colossal, and it was everything that he had imagined
Mm.
it would be. And in the book, he talks about the steps to take to make that happen,
Great.
including how he found his wife.
Great.
Yep.
What I
And
want,
by the way, Tom is an executive producer. By the way, he's an executive producer of Anxious Nation, Tom and Kathy.
well,
Yeah.
we have something in common. So, like,
Yeah,
great.
for
I'm going to
sure.
reach out to him.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But I want people who are not on the billionaire track. I want people who are struggling to get by and still listen to this podcast and go, that was incredibly helpful for me. Now, we've already given them a lot, but I want more for them. People who are not on the well-to-do road, but on a road that is way more pothole filled with a car that doesn't get them
I
there.
hear you. Here's what I think about that is everybody's road is pothole
Mhm.
filled,
Mhm.
right? Everybody's.
Yeah.
And if you think that people get to be successful because they didn't have a lot of bumps in the road, think again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some of the greatest overcoming adversity stories are from those people. Bob Parsons, founder of GoDaddy and PXG. Bob grew up very poor. He flunked the 5th grade. They passed him in high school because he joined the United States Marines and was on his way to Vietnam, and they never thought he was going to come home.
Mhm.
And when he came home, he taught himself how to write a program for a computer. It was just like, and he studied accounting. And the reason he studied accounting was because he could go to college on the GI Bill. And they handed him the booklet that said pick a major. And he opened it. First thing on the list was accounting. And he said if he had opened it from the back, he would have been a zoologist.
Right.
It-
Right.
And he went on to build Parsons Technology, which was a precursor to QuickBooks. And he sold that company. And then he built GoDaddy. And now he's got the #1 luxury golf club manufacturing company in the world. But his story, listen, is a man who suffered with PTSD his
Mhm.
entire life
Mhm. Mhm.
and who had a lot of issues. So I think what is so important for your audience to know is there are 7 basic plots in Hollywood, right? Every story, every movie comes from 7 basic plots. Yours is not that special,
Right.
right? It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or if you're struggling, like it what you do. And this is the tagline for Anxious Nation, right? What do you do with those situations
Mhm.
when they arise? Do you rise up or do you fall apart? And that's universal. And that's why the tagline for Anxious Nation is harnessing anxious energy for good.
Yeah.
Because if you learn that anxiety is nothing but energy, then it's not as scary, right? Then you can figure out how to harness it and make it work for you. We see it all the time with athletes and musicians and actors and lots of people who take that energy and they pour it into something else. That is true for everything we do in life.
Mhm.
And it is not being afraid of the unknown. It's stepping into the dark and not away from it. I think it's so important to understand that you've gotten through every single horrible, worst day ever days of your life so far. And so here you are. What are you going to do today? And I talked a little bit about intentional living, and the overriding message of intentional living is I think most people wake up every day with very good intentions.
Mhm.
So
They don't always get to cross the bridge to living with intentionality,
Yes.
right? This is my plan, but it never happens. Okay. Today I'm going to reach out to 3 friends and I want to just check in and see how they're doing. Well, crossing that bridge with
do
from going from good intentions to intentionality is doing it.
Mhm.
And that is the secret right there.
To me, this is a mic drop moment. To me, that's the kit and the caboodle. To move from this is my plan, here's my
Gonna.
intention, I'm gonna, to
Someday I will.
someday I
Right.
will, to I'm doing it in the tiniest way. And what I
Mhm.
love, it is the tiniest that makes the most difference. Pick up the phone and make the call. Or write that handwritten note. See how he's doing. These are the actions that make us feel uplifted and part of the uplifted tribe. And no more, no less than that. And go through the darkness and the pain and the difficulty. And there will be something at the other end. We don't know exactly what.
We've talked a lot about this, Harry, because you and I do this where we share with each other on a Monday our intentions, and then we get back on the following Monday and say, okay, this is what I did about it. And we do better when we do that. And then when we stop that habit, it stops.
And what I love, and I'm gonna do, you talked about that, I'm gonna organize that party, that gathering, that for damn sure. That I'm gonna do. But I'm gonna do just today when this podcast ends. I'm gonna reach out and call. I'm not gonna tell you who it is, but I'm gonna call someone and tell them how much I love them and appreciate them and how much they mean to me. Period. Now that is living what I believe is good. What's so obvious?
It's better than sending a text, right?
Exactly.
And it's
Exactly.
better than sending a text. And I'm not against texting. I'm not against, but I think when so few people want to have conversations anymore, and I force them, it's what I do for a living anyway. And then they're really grateful for it. People
Yeah.
are really grateful for it. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take any money.
This is what I was saying to Connie about a map. Your life's journey has given many maps for our listeners. Let's let them see, hey, walk this way, not that way. It's a lot better. I.e., don't give a shit about what people think of you. I mean, it's really not helpful, etc. Or
Well,
worrying about the
yeah.
future.
Any of those addictions, by the way, are like
I know.
dead weight holding you back. And I think now more than ever, I think we want to lighten our load. The world is heavy.
Yeah.
And so let's lighten our load.
Oh, so I'm mindful of our time. We could just go on and on, but I want to be sensitive to, I know when people ask for a glass of water, not to hose them down. And I want to be mindful of, what do people want to receive from this podcast? Have we given them all that we can in an hour?
Well, I think
Would you like to share anything else, Con?
well, now that here I'm back, so we'll say, I think when we talked about this before, I see Laura. I met Laura as this advocate who was creating a film that was important, and then I met her as a master storyteller. And then I got to read a lot of your story. And there's also this Laura, the woman who's been through a lot of stuff. And so I want to make sure that we've gotten anything else from you that you think is wisdom to share, how you get through some of those big things in life that you've gotten through. I mean, you've been a really big advocate of your daughter, but you're a single mom doing it, and you had breast cancer shortly. I mean, there's just so much we could talk about. I want to make sure we get your story from you.
I appreciate that. I don't know that my story is all that unique, but I can tell you that I had written a book with Joan Lunden called Had I Known, and it was about her breast cancer journey. And Joan Lunden and I have been friends for many years. And Joan called to tell me that she had cancer. And and in the next breath, which is very Joan, said, and I want to write a book about it. And I want you to write it with me. And I paused because I thought, you're like, you don't know what's ahead of you right now. Like, maybe we should put the focus on your health.
Right.
But she needed something, I think, to distract the obvious. So we chronicled her breast cancer journey in real time. And as a dear friend, it was emotional and challenging. And if I ever thought for 1 minute that she was doing a disservice to herself, it would have been a very easy thing for me to say, hey, let's just put a pin in this. On the day that book came out, I was in the shower and I felt a lump in my left breast. And I knew immediately, that it wasn't, this was a Tuesday morning, and on Monday it wasn't there. Tuesday it was there. And I knew something was wrong. I was also taking Sevi to my therapist in New York City because my daughter had connected. My mom had died of cancer, and now Joni had cancer, and she thought all mommies get cancer. So I said to her,
No.
no, not all mommies get cancer. And even if they do, not all mommies die. Look, Joan is doing great, right? So I was taking her that day to my therapist.
Mm.
And then we were going to the book launch and book signing for Had I Known. And it turns out that I did have breast cancer. And the only time I cried in the entire journey was when they did the biopsy and the doctor said to me, yeah, this is going to come back malignant. And I
Mm.
cried because I had just told my daughter,
Mhm.
not all mommies get
Mhm.
cancer. And I didn't want her to think that I lied. She was an anxious kid to begin with. And Joan, to my benefit, once she found out that I had cancer, and it took me about a month to tell her because she was very busy promoting the book and I didn't want another layer on her,
Mhm.
she reached out and made a call to the head of Sloan Kettering, found him in Portugal
Mhm.
in the middle of the night. And I was in his office that next Monday. And I had a very privileged pathway, which I struggle with because
Mhm.
I don't think that my healthcare should be any better than anybody else's healthcare. But I was able to maneuver through that system easily and in great part because of Joan. And I will never, ever forget what she did in quarterbacking all of this for me. But I will say this. Joan came to me and asked me to write her book called Why Did I Come Into This Room, which is a book about aging. And I said, listen, I wrote your book on breast cancer and I got breast cancer. I said, if you think I'm going to write a book on aging with you, you got another thing coming. You're on your own.
Right on. Right on.
And truly, that was my answer. But the reason I did that was because after all the books that Joan has written, I actually thought she could do it on her own.
Mhm.
And I said, I will be right here. What you did for me, I will do for you. I will quarterback this for you. I will make sure that it's a bestseller. I will do all the things you need me to do, but you can do this. And she did.
Yeah.
And that's what you do with good friends,
Yeah.
right? You never have to ask. And so that's a very quick version of my breast cancer. And I, as a public service announcement, I will also say what I want people to know is we've all seen those signs. If you see something, say something. If you feel something, do something. My
Mhm.
cancer was actually very aggressive. And if I hadn't caught it, I wasn't due for a mammogram for another 4 months. I had a clean mammogram 6 months earlier. And so I think it's really important to be proactive in any medical journey, whether you're trying to figure out if your kid has anxiety or you're dealing with a cancer, or you have to be proactive because we live in a system that's just going to keep pushing you through, pushing you through,
Yep.
pushing you through, pushing you through. And you need to be your best advocate and you need to be your child's best
Yep.
advocate.
Good point.
I like that summary. I like that reminder.
Mhm.
I like that we were returning to the village. Remember who is in your green room. Expand your circle of friends and people who are uplifting, no matter what you're going through, whether it be breast cancer or a child's mental health crisis. This is just unbelievably factual. Please reach out to people in your network and get a nice support system around you when you're going through the most difficult times, period.
That is, I will tell you, I tell people this all the time. There's two things I want to say. One, don't go on the internet and start reading because all you're going to read is horrible things, right? And two, surround yourself with lifters.
Yeah.
Do not surround yourself with people who are all doom and gloom. You want people that are going to lift you, that are going to be there to support you. And you want to be able to make the best decision for you. And what happened to Aunt Sally over here may not be the best thing that is for you. And so again, being your best advocate, your number one advocate for yourself, and stop that doctor and say, slow down. I really want to take what you're saying in. I'm going to take notes. Say it again.
Mhm.
Slow that doctor down because they are going from room to room to room to room. And
And
what's
you,
routine for them is first time for you. And it's really important that and when you get a good doctor, they know that.
Yeah.
They do. And so I I very much, and for a long time, I spoke about my breast cancer journey. I would do a lot of speaking engagements around it. But it's my friends will tell you that I moved through my breast cancer in such a way where many of them just forgot that I had it.
Mhm.
And it's just the way that I moved through it. I didn't tell anybody I had it until the morning of I had a double mastectomy,
Wow.
and I sent out a mass email, and I didn't want anybody's opinion.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just didn't want to hear everybody's horrible story about their aunt or their mother
Mhm.
or their grandmother or
Mhm.
this or and oh my God, the surgery was botched. I didn't want to hear any of it because I believed so much in the power of a positive mindset,
Mhm.
right? That miracle mentality that Tim talks
Oh, yeah.
about.
Yes.
And so
But you're
yeah,
articulating not just a positive mindset, you're also articulating, and I want to underscore it, it is surround yourself with a network of uplifters
Mhm.
and avoid a negative Nancy or whomever my surgery, all of it's really important to keep good company and be good company and surround yourself with good
yeah.
company and be an uplifter, surround yourself with uplifters, avoid the negatoids, and you will travel every single journey more better if we
Mhm.
do. So I hope that people who listen to this podcast go, yeah, I can do that. That they can do. That's
Mhm.
a
They're
bridge too
certainly going
far.
to think that I'm fun at a cocktail party.
For sure.
So
N
I'm
and
available
no
if anybody wants
drama.
to have me
No
over.
drama.
No trouble.
Really.
So
So good. So
yeah.
Joan, what's your name again? Laura.
People get
Thank
us
you.
confused
Well,
very
you've
often.
introduced us
So
to some very special people over the last couple of months, and for
Totally.
that we're appreciative because these takeaways that that we keep bringing up in these podcasts, stuff from Tim, stuff from Joan, they've all been enlightening, and now you've added to that pile of wisdom. So thank you.
they all
Totally.
get it from me. No, I'm kidding. No,
So
I
you
do
get the
not. I
final
get it from
word.
them. It's the absolute opposite.
Yeah,
I
I know.
100% get it from them.
we absorbed it too. Trust us. And so for us, we would love to know: is there somebody in your life who's been specifically heliotropic that you can tell us about?
Given that we just had this incredible conversation, you can tell I have a lot of people that fit that
Mhm,
category in my life. And that
mhm,
doesn't just happen,
mhm,
right? You draw to you
Yeah.
how you move through the world, I think.
mhm.
And but there is somebody that I wanted to talk about, and it's such a unbelievable and unusual friendship that has spanned 50 years. And that is my fifth grade school teacher, Sharon
Oh,
Bakoff,
cool.
Mm,
who I have um, the most wonderful relationship with. My mom died as I was going into fifth grade,
Yes.
and Sharon took me under her wing and has been talk about being a North Star
mm,
in my life. And she and her husband live not too far from where I live here in California. And they live their lives in such a way that I'm inspired by them, by their philanthropic efforts. Sharon and Richard have become like surrogate grandparents for my daughter.
mm,
Family is made in many different ways. And family of choice, I think sometimes is even better
Mhm.
than the family we're born into.
mhm.
And for me, it's my fifth grade school teacher who when if you ever met her, you'd never believe that she was my teacher. And her nickname was the Dragon Lady. So because she was tough, but she took me under her wing and she taught me a lot about how I wanted to grow into the world. And I will forever be grateful for that. And what an unusual relationship to have. And it has been 50 years.
It's lovely.
Oh,
It's a great story. We'd love to send her something. Recognize her
oh, yeah,
heliotropic nature. So we'll reach out and get that
we will.
address.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, this has been a treat for us because we're usually talking business and data and numbers and all sorts of exciting things. So to sit and talk about all the goodness in your life that you've brought to other people has been a lot of fun for me.
So nourishing
Mhm.
that I can't wait to have the next conversation with you, which won't be recorded and sent out to the world, but it'll continue. But it'll continue to nourish me, and love having met you.
Yeah, I feel so blessed, Harry. I really do. And Connie, I've gotten to know you and I'm so grateful. And I love the work that you're doing.
Mm,
And I couldn't be more proud. And here's to season 3.
Season 3.
Season 3.
Right?
You're
Season
you're
3.
closing us out. You're the big closer for season 2. So yes, moving on to season
Totally.
3.
Yeah.
And thanks for being in our corner. We appreciate that.
Always. Thank you both.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you, Laura. So we just recorded this amazing podcast with Laura Morton, and we're starting a new process of what did you remember from that will be a nudgy reminder that I will literally remember and not have to look at notes. Okay, Con, here goes. I'll go first. Remember when you're going through something really, really difficult, like in her case, her double mastectomy, don't hang out with negatoids that'll fill your head with crazy stuff.
Mhm.
That's one.
Yep. I mean, the reminder to just the simple thing, reach out to friends, reach out to people you care about. Even if you know they're going through something, take the time and do it.
Another one was for all the people that she interviewed for all of her bestsellers, what are the lessons that she took away? Their failures were their greatest teachers, and every one of them have amazing failures. And that is what they loved the most, i.e. what they got the most of. So that's a great nugget to take away.
Yeah. The last one I can remember is really talking about the 4,
For addictions,
the 4 addictions, and they're not like anything I expected them to be. So I don't know if I'll remember them. So I know one was worrying about the past.
yeah.
And worrying about the future was another
Yep.
one. Drama. People get addicted to drama. And then I think the last one was something I always struggle with, what people think about you.
Exactly. You got them all. And they're helpful. They're
Yeah.
good to remind us. Those are the big takeaways for us. And I'm thrilled that we were able to do this little summary.
Yeah. And I think for our listeners, we would love to hear if there were other little nudgy reminders you'd like to share with others. So if you do, one way you can do this is share this podcast.
Thanks, Con.